Hi everyone, I hope you guys are doing good. So as a part of our Postgres tutorial series, in last lecture we learned how to raise info, warning, notice. Also we learned how to raise exceptions from functions and other database objects, right? Now in this lecture we will learn about handling exceptions in procedures and functions. Okay, so without wasting time, let's start. So I have one function, I have some function prepared for you for the demo. Okay, so let's create one function first. Okay, so let's go in our PG admin. We are going to use organization database. Let me open a query tool. Okay, so in the query tool, let me create a function. Okay, so let me just create function, then I'll explain you guys what this function is doing. So let me just paste it here. Okay. So this is organization employee count function. So I'm passing an organization index, that is organization ID, and I'm getting the number of employees working in that organization. Okay. So we have a organization table, right, which has organization data, right? And I'm passing the organization index, and from this table I'm getting the number of employees working in that organization, right? So that is the output of this function, right? So in this function, I'm doing nothing, just a simple thing. So I have declared one variable LV employee count, which will be a type of org dot number of employees percent type, right? So uh, in this variable, I'm going to take the number of employees value in LV employee count from this view, organization view, right, which is based on organization table. Okay, so this app org view is based on this organization table. Okay, so it has same data as organization table, where organization index equals to p org index. P org index is the parameter which I'm passing from this function, right? And then I'm raising a information message that raise info employee count for this organization index, and I'm giving the p org index, the organization index which I'm passing, and is LV employee count is the number of employees working in that organization, right? And then from this function I'm returning the number of employees count, right? So this is a simple function. Let's create this function. Okay, so I think our function got created, right? Now let me check in Object Explorer. So in organization database, we have created in app schema. Let's expand app schema. In app schema, you have to go in functions, right? So right now we have seven functions. So this is the function which we created, right? So this is the function which we created, right? Or employee count function, right? So our function got created, right? So now let me execute this function and let me call this function. So I'm passing organization index as 1, right? Which is the organization ID from this organization table, right? So it is giving me 10,000, right? So that is the employee count for this organization, right? We can also check in organization table or organization view, right? So let me just do the query where org index org index equals to 1, right? So let's check. So as you can see, number of employees is 10,000, right? That is what we are getting in the function output, right? So our function is working as expected, right? Now, since this organization has only 100 records, right? So it can give result till 100 organizations, right? So it has 101 organization data, right? Now, if I give 1000, right, as organization ID, what will happen, right? So, since the 1000, this organization ID does not exist in this table, right? So it should raise an exception, right? So let me just run this. Okay. So it is giving me an error, and error is query return no rows, right? Because this 1000 organization index does not exist in the table, right? And SQL state it is giving us P002, right? So we will see what is P002, right? but you can see how exceptions are raised, right, in a function, right? So exceptions are raised from here, right? So I'm calling it for 1000 organization index. So from here itself, when it is selecting number of employees into this LV employee count, so it is not finding that 1000 organization index, right? So exceptions are raised from this line itself, right? Exceptions are raised from this line itself, right? And we don't have any exception handler in this function, right? Now we'll see how to handle these exceptions. Okay, so exceptions are getting raised automatically when there is any issue in your function, right? Or you can also raise exception by yourself, right? By just writing a if block and checking that if this organization index 1000 I'm passing exist in this table or not. If not, then raise exception using raise keyword, right? Which I have explained it in the last lecture very well, right? How to raise exceptions from here using raise keyword, right? Now we'll talk about handling of exceptions, right? So you'll have to add an exception block, right? Here before end, right? So that you can handle exception, right? So now no, let me just paste this function with exception block, right? So this is the function I have created with the exception block. Okay, so let me just paste it here. Okay, so I'll just paste it here, right? Let me just give a line here. Okay. So, what is the difference in this? So, I have done nothing, just that I have added an exception block which start from this exception keyword, and I am writing when others, then raise info, I am printing error message, and the keyword to print that is SQL error ERRM, and raise info error state, and the keyword to raise is SQL state, right? And since exception is raised from this line, so after this line it is directly jumping into exception block, right? When there is an exception, right? So you have to provide some default value for this LV employee count, since I am returning LV employee count, right? So it is not reaching here, right? So you'll have to give the default value in this LV employee count variable, and you have to return that LV employee count from the function, right? Because function needs some return value, right? Even if it comes into exception, you have to return the default result, right? When there is any error, right? So that's how we handle exceptions, right? So if let me just execute this function. Okay, so I think function got created, right? Now if I no call this function for 1000, right? Let's see what happens. Okay. So in the output, I am getting mass output as 0, which is the default value I am returning when there is exception, right? Return LV employee count as 0, and in message, I am getting both the message which I am giving, right? Using raise info error message is query return no rows, and error state is SQL state, right? P002, right? So this is the SQL ID, and this is the error message of that exception, right? So that's how you can handle exception. If you write when others, it will handle all the exceptions which has been raised by your function body, right? So when others is a default exception, declaration, it can handle all the exceptions, right? But now since you already know which exception is raised, that is P002, right? So you can trap that exception using this SQL state, and then you can do the specific operation, right? Right, so when others is for if when you do development and you don't know which exception will be raised, right? So you used when others and you got the exceptions, right? What has been returned by this function. But as now you already know the exception, right? So you can use this named exception and trap the exception here in exception block and give the message or give the default value, right? Okay, so before going to that, I want to show you this on the documentation page there is the error code appendix, right? So it has all the error codes as well as the error conditions. Okay, so this is the error code, first column, second column is condition name, right? So if you scroll down, all the exceptions are there as defined here with their error codes, right? So error SQL state and exception name, right? So we have received this P002, right? So we are receiving this P002, right, as exception and the message, right? So that means this exception has been written, right? P002 no underscore data underscore found, right? This is the exception, right? Now to handle this exception, this named exception, we can do that by just defining the named exception. So that I have done in this function. Let me just paste it. So let me just paste it here. Okay. So let's check the difference. Okay. So here what I did is since we already know the SQL state, error state is P002. So I have written when SQL state P002, then LV employee count equals to 0 and return LV employee count, right? Return the default value. But I have also kept when others, right? Because for any other exception other than this P SQL state 002, that will be trapped here, right? So as you know the exception names, right? So you can trap it using the when clause and then you can return the default result or return the default messages, right? In the exception block. But keep the when others as well. It can handle all other exception, which you have not covered using this named exception, right? So let's check this. So let me just execute it. Okay, so function got executed. Right, let's call this 1000 index, right? So I'm getting output as 0, right? But in message I'm not getting anything, right? Because I'm not giving any message here, right? So it's trapped in this block when SQL state P002. So it is just returning the default count, that is 0, right? Which I'm getting in data output, right? But I am not written any message, so it's not giving me any message, right? There is one more method. Either you can write SQL state or you can write the error name itself, this error condition itself, right? So I can write no data found in a when block, right? So instead of when SQL state P002, I can write no underscore data underscore found, right? That will also do same thing, okay? And so let's execute this and let's check if it's working good. So let me just execute it. Function got executed. Let me just call this function using 1000. So I'm getting output as 0 and message I'm not getting anything, right? So both error condition or SQL state does the same thing, right? So you can use any of them. If you have multiple exceptions are known to you, right? You can also use or condition like when no data found or too many rows, right? Like that, too many rows, right? So like that, if you have multiple known exceptions, so you can use like this. You can also write other block like uh, when you can also write other when block, right? So let me just write it in capital when too many rows, right? Then like that. So if you so whatever known exceptions you have, you can cover in that, and whatever unknown exception you don't know, right? You can those will be covered in when others, right? That's how we handled exception, right? So you can write when too many rows and then you can give the default result here, right? Or in the same block also using or condition you can handle that, right? So that's how we handled named exception, right? There's one more method where it will show the in which line the error was there, right? So for that there is a stack trace, okay, exception handler using a stack trace. So let me just I've used this in this function. So let me just paste it here and I'll explain you how to do that. Okay, so let me just paste it here. Okay. So in this function, if you see, I have done when SQL state P002, that is as previously, right? Then I am giving the default value, return LV employee count and LV employee count equals to 0. I've also used this get stack diagnostic. LV error stack is a variable I have defined here as text, and in that I am getting PG exception context, right? At that I'm getting in LV error stack, and then I'm raising the notice error as LV error stack, right? So I'm printing that LV error stack, right? So this is a pre-built no Postgres defined function which returns LV which returns the context message context, right? So it will print complete stack of your error, right? If you are calling one function into another, right? And if it's if the called function, right, if the called function has raised an exception, so it will print all the exceptions, right, from start to end, right? So for that it's very useful, right? So along with that, in SQL state 002 I have also used this get stack error, right? So let me execute this function. So, okay, so function got created, right? Let me just call this function using 1000. Okay, so I'm getting output as 0, right? As per previous when SQL state P002, but I'm also getting a notice here which I'm printing in this line, right? Raise notice error, LV error stack. So it is saying error PLPG SQL function. It is giving the function name in which the exception was raised, and also it is giving the line number in that function, right? So line number 6, and this function org employee count, right? So our function name is org employee count, and it is giving line number 6 at SQL statement, right? So it is giving me the line number also for that function, right? So that way we know, right, which in which block we are getting the functions, right? So using this, you can get the, you can get the complete stack of your errors, right? You can also define user defined tables like custom table, error tables, right? And you can insert errors, right? You can here, you can insert errors, right? Insert into that table, insert into error table, right? Insert into error table, and in values you can give all the messages which you are returning, all the error which has been raised, right? So this is the way to maintain a custom error table when raising, when handling the exception, right? So I hope you guys understood how to raise exceptions and how to handle exceptions in Postgres using the named exception as well as using when others clause, right? So I hope you guys like this lecture. If you guys like this lecture, please subscribe my channel. Thank you guys.